Hello folks. So let's continue talk on Rahu and Ketu placements in the chart. Today I'm going to speak about Ketu in the 7th, Rahu in the 1st. So let's get started. The 1-7 axis tends to be a fascinating place for the nodes. Ketu in the 7th people tend to be very concerned with partnerships, marriage, others' opinions of them. It's important for others to like them, to the point where they see themselves through the eyes of others, because other people's opinions greatly impact them. Building your own identity is important when Ketu is in the 7th house. So the balance is between your personal needs and the needs of others. Ketu in the 7th can hinder forming lasting relationships. Of course, you have to see the strength of Venus and the 7th Lord to determine how this will play out. If you do have this placement, it's best to give your partner a lot of space. It's similar to having that Mars in the 7th house signature. Now, when Ketu here realizes that they need to find themselves, they will go to the other extreme. And they can become very, very self-centered, focusing only on egotistic needs. This can result in unsteady passions and attractions. You'll be running after the next shiny thing, the next shiny place, the next shiny person, and that kind of thing. Yeah, that can easily happen if you go to the other extreme. There's also a passion for unworthy things. And again, similar to that Rahu in the 7th, you can be attracted to those people that are simply not good for you, but you find them attractive. It could also be that your partners don't show you proper care. They don't show you proper respect. But nonetheless, you're attracted to them. This is a sign where Ketu's... so now here we have to see the sign where Ketu is sitting, because that's going to greatly modify this. It will tell us about also how this imbalance, how this pattern is repeating, perhaps from previous lives, right? So for example, your Ketu is sitting in Cancer, right? Your Ketu is sitting in Cancer in the 7th house. Then this can mean that you've always put family and domestic needs before your own needs in the past, right? And now you need to concentrate on your own place in the world, maybe your career. So the result of not being attracted to the right people, or not finding a suitable partner, or the wrong people being attracted to you, that you're attracting the wrong crowd also, because of course you're going to have a sense of that. But ultimately, what does it result in? It results in giving you more time for yourself. Right, that's what it comes down to. It gives you more time to yourself. It gives you more time to, it will give you time to build the confidence that you need. It will give you time to build your image. It will give you time to build your self-respect in order to attract and in order to be attracted to people that are good for you and that treat you well. Again, we can't just say that as a conclusion, because we have to also see what the 7th Lord is doing. We have to see what Venus is doing to see how this position will play out, right? And how you will handle this placement. With a compromised Venus and Moon, or maybe they're sitting in, maybe Venus and Moon are sitting in a difficult sign, then this can exaggerate Ketu's negative significations in the 7th house. Until that maturity, which is quite late in life. But it doesn't mean that the problem cannot be resolved before that. If you are, 7th house is also the house of spiritual practices, right? So if you are somebody who has a devotional practice, a regular, consistent practice, then this can modify the results also. Because when you change yourself internally, the fact is that when you change yourself internally, when that shift happens a little bit, even a little bit, then it has to be reflected in what you're attracting. Right? That's just nature. So rather than attracting partners that are, or people that you're attracted to, rather than attracting people that are a little bit lost and confused, and maybe they're into drugs, alcohol, like there could be substance abuse also in partners with Ketu in the 7th. So rather than attracting that, what is a positive manifestation of Ketu? Well, that's someone who is perhaps spiritually evolved. And I hesitate to use that term spiritually evolved because it's such an arrogant term. But what I mean is somebody who is spiritually, like, they have a consciousness. Maybe they have a consciousness about, like, yes, I'm a bit lost in life, but here's what I'm doing to kind of understand my situation and balance it out, right? And that's really what we're talking about. It could also attract then people who are coming from, for example, who spend a lot of time and energy with a spiritual community like that they belong to, for example. Right? That it can, on the other hand, attract a Ketu person that fits that bill. So there is a negative and a positive manifestation to everything. And the realization, because we're talking about Ketu, doesn't usually come until later in life. But it doesn't have to come later in life. It can come earlier. You have to, of course, be... and if it has come earlier, you have to, of course, adjust your life so that you put yourself in an environment where you meet people who are personifying that positive manifestation of Ketu in the 7th rather than the negative. Because it's very, very easy, very, very easy to attract the ones who are personifying the negative because of this placement. So usually it isn't until the 40s that people understand how to really relax in this area of life. With respect to partners, as I mentioned, choosing someone from someone who has a spiritual bent, someone who has their own life. Right? Someone who has their own life. That's important too, because Ketu with the 7th can bring people who don't. So this is very important. Yeah. Now, the place where Ketu sits creates detachment. So it's important that you nor the partner is too dependent on each other. Because as I said also, Ketu does mimic that Mars energy somewhat. So Mars in the 7th is the same thing. If you have Mars in the 7th or the 1st, you must give space to the partner. And ideally you want someone who's independent, who's not too needy. Who's not too needy. If you're attracting people that are too needy, get a dog. Get a dog. That dog will absorb the energy of that neediness. Yeah. So Ketu in the 7th cannot just lead to a feeling of detachment from the partner, but also separation from partners. There's also rejection where Ketu is. So either you're rejecting the partner, they could be rejecting you, and that could be going on and off. So in some way, either through spiritual practice, for instance, bring love to that 7th house place by resisting the urge to criticize, to judge. Cultivating a spiritual practice will help. Yeah. Rahu in the first can make you self-absorbed. So it's good to choose a partner who's grounded, as I mentioned, rather than someone who's too needy. This Ketu placement normally brings a late marriage, especially if the nodal axis is somehow activated, right? Like in the earlier years. And actually it's good to wait. It's good to wait till, according to me, it's good to wait till you're in your 40s to marry if you have this placement, to really understand it. Because by then you'll have the wisdom to make a good choice in life partner. And don't have expectations if you're doing it before your 40s. Because in your 40s, you're more mature about your expectations. But if you're doing it before your 40s, don't have expectations for a conventional, traditional union. Especially if you marry before mid-40s. This Ketu in the 7th could also mean that the partner themselves is unconventional in some way. Right? So if your marriage is based on similar backgrounds, culture, status, financial position, and then it may be difficult to sustain it. When you actually get married, make sure it's low-key. Make sure it's a low-key marriage, like only a few people. Even like a quickie court ceremony or temple marriage, or like a church temple marriage is good. Somewhere in a remote location for marriage is also good. So we're talking about Ketu. Ketu here doesn't like anything conventional. So if you can maintain some kind of non-traditional way of relating with this person, with this relationship, then it can work very well. For instance, your professions could be completely different. Your background is completely different, but you may have common interests. And these interests hold a relationship together, for instance. Or maybe that thing that you have in common is like a hobby, or a spiritual group that, like I mentioned, like a community that you belong to, that you both belong to. That's excellent for this Ketu placement. Really excellent. This will curb the negative manifestations of Ketu in the 7th house. And I want to go back to that just for a second here. Like of course I mentioned 7th house is spiritual practice, but it's also community. Like not just sitting in your room and meditating. That's good. But when I'm talking about Ketu, I'm talking about the 7th house. It could be the 11th house, right? It's that Kama Trikon, right? When we're talking about the 7th, the 10th, the 11th, we're talking about outward. We're talking about something that people can see. So you both belong to, for instance, a spiritual community where you give your time every once a week. Or you, every once a week, you go to some kind of a group meditation like practice or some spiritual practice together. Or you, like once a month or once every 3 months, or like you do something with the community. So that's important, because we're talking about the 7th house. Here, Ketu in the 7th actually can make you very emotional about your partner. But when you start living together, you start to see their flaws, right? And this is also this is the same with Rahu in the 7th. And this happens before, like especially before the nodal maturity. And as I mentioned, separation can also be the case here. Divorce can also be the case. But again, we have to see what's happening in the rest of the chart. Not just what's happening in the rest of the chart, but what dasha is getting activated when you get married or when you get into that relationship. Are you going through Rahu Ketu when you have this? Well, then yes, the chances are higher. Then you have to see the impact of the 7th Lord. What's the 12th Lord doing? What's the 7th Lord doing? What's Venus doing? So by itself, it doesn't mean divorce, right? It's just, but all this begins to fade when you reach your mid to late 40s, because your perception of relationships becomes more, it becomes a little bit more pragmatic than fanciful and idealistic, and You know, because it can bring that idealism also into a relationship, that Ketu in the 7th. If you have your own business, then this placement can make you very good at negotiating and dealing with others. But I think with time, you might lose interest in that. This placement can also make you travel a lot. You might also change home a lot. Again, you have to see what the moon is doing, what the 4th lord is doing. Is it impacting Ketu, right? Is it an immovable sign, like a Chara sign? Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, Libra. As a woman, you have to be careful with your reproductive health with Ketu in the 7th house. Ketu in the 7th house can make you very good, a very charismatic speaker. Even if you're a little bit shy at first. You tend to be very straightforward also with this placement. And this can, of course, offend some people. But in this way, you end up making friends with those who understand you well. Right? So accommodating others is important with this position, because you can often have the spotlight on yourself. This position can also lead to loneliness at some phase in your life. So let's talk about Rahu in the 1st. First is what? First house is body, right? It's your body. It's your intellect. It's your constitution. Like Vata, Pitta, Kapha, that sort of thing. But with Rahu in the 1st, your constitution can be more towards Vata, right? Because Rahu being an air planet. It depends, of course, which sign Rahu is in, where the Lagna Lord is and all that. But we can expect this Rahu placement to impact the health matters, similar to Ketu in the 1st. How it will affect you, again, depends on which sign it sits in. So if Rahu is in an air sign, for example, it could cause imbalances with like skin, like dryness and things like that, hair, nails, constipation, bloating, that kind of thing, because that's airy stuff. With Rahu in the 1st, you can be very tall, taller than your family members. There may be something out of the ordinary about your physical appearance also, especially if Rahu is closer to the ascendant. You will certainly stand out in some way or the other. Something about your looks. It can also be something about your personality, like maybe you're rebellious. Like you're kind of, you think outside of the box, like you're very different from your family in that way. You might be a pioneer in your field. That I've seen a lot with this Rahu in the 1st. Revolutionary, in fact, in some way. This Rahu can give above average intelligence, similar to Ketu in the 1st. We have to see Mercury's position to confirm this. You tend to focus a lot on yourself and your image, though. The clothes you wear, the food you eat, the people who you associate with. You can also be secretive at times and put forth an image that really isn't you. And partners can also complain that you're too selfish, that you're too self-absorbed. But this also depends on Lagna Lord's position, as well as the dignity of the sun, right? If the sun is in Aries or Leo, or if the sun is with Rahu, then yes, the focus will be more on your needs rather than others. This Rahu placement can lead toward false pride, though, an exaggerated sense of self, but at the same time without the knowledge of the self. Right, so it's very important to go to that Ketu place for that reason. You can act mindlessly at times because of this also. But I think by your 40s, with the maturity of the nodal axis, this will change for the better. With Rahu's aspect on the 5th, you may get into romantic affairs that can make you stand out in some way. Maybe you're dating somebody famous. Right? Creativity will be at peak with this placement, especially if the nodes are getting activated. And again, when I say the nodes getting activated, I don't mean just the dashas of Rahu Ketu. Of course, that's obvious. Yes, they're getting activated, but also in your 40s, for everybody, the nodal axis is activated. You can be in your 40s, but you're in the dasha of Saturn, which has no connection to the nodes are still getting activated. Right? This placement can give you very keen insight if Rahu is operating with its higher principles. You can have keen insights into future trends, as well as it can make you very philosophical too. So it's a good position for scientists, explorers, writers, philosophers. Rahu here can give you a lot of energy depending on which sign it's situated in. So it's very good for stamina. There's an intense desire to succeed in the material world, to be known, to be recognized, to be famous. So you have to see the position of the sun and the Lagna Lord to determine which area of your life you may get recognition. And of course also the dasha that you're going through. You also may be dismissive about what others say about you, think about you, talk about you. And as I said, you can be quite revolutionary in your thinking also, and do things outside of the norms of your birth culture, your birthplace. Being Rahu is an outcast, right? You can be very innovative in your field too. Like you come up with something nobody else has. So there's a potential to be pioneering in this way. And again, how it will play out depends on what else is going on in the chart. Be careful of getting too obsessed with your goals, with your desires. Like you can be found running after this and that. Right? But because it's Rahu, sometimes you may not have the ability to process all of the experiences that you're chasing after, that you're having. Right? So this can result in mental health issues also. But of course you can't say that alone. You have to see the dignity of Moon and Mercury to determine this. If Rahu is afflicted, then you can come across as being quite strange. Maybe in the way that you like, how you express yourself, like the words you use, the way you dress. Rahu here can give a lot of stamina though, and vitality. And it can give you the ability to endure being alone for long periods of time. But relationships, that's a key, that's a thing, that area can get affected if you gravitate towards being alone. So at least till your 40s. You can have many partners in your life with this position. But in your younger years, it can be a dissatisfying love life. Unless the chart otherwise promises, like you could be a favorable dasha that you're experiencing. But usually, if you're not going through a Venus dasha, for instance, it can lead to being single for a long time, till you're in your 40s, late 40s. Second half of life is better with this position, especially after Rahu's maturity, which is between the age of 42 and 47. So that's all for now. And if you like the video, please do share, comment, subscribe, and hit the like button. Bye for now.